What if I told you that while we've mapped every corner of the Earth's surface, charted the deepest ocean trenches, and even photographed distant galaxies, we might have completely missed the most advanced civilization on our planet? Not because it's hidden on some remote island or buried under ice, but because it exists in a place we've barely begun to understand, the realm directly beneath our feet. Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most persistent mysteries in human history. A question that has surfaced in cultures across every continent, whispered in ancient texts, carved into temple walls, and passed down through generations of storytellers who insist they're preserving truth, not fiction. What if the greatest empire humanity has ever produced isn't one that rose and fell on the surface, but one that retreated below and continues to thrive in chambers and cities we can't even imagine? Welcome to Before Law, where we dig beneath the surface of accepted history to uncover the stories that might just rewrite everything we think we know. If you're drawn to mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality itself, consider subscribing. We're building a community of curious minds who aren't afraid to question the official narrative. The idea sounds impossible, doesn't it? In our age of satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, how could an entire civilization remain hidden? But here's what's fascinating. The deeper researchers look into this possibility, the more they discover that our planet might be far more mysterious than we've been taught to believe. Let's start with something that should make you uncomfortable. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about what lies just 20 miles beneath our own feet. Think about that for a moment. We can tell you the exact temperature on a planet millions of miles away, but we're still guessing about the composition and structure of our own planet's interior. Our deepest drilling projects have barely scratched the surface, literally reaching less than 1% of the distance to Earth's core. This knowledge gap isn't just inconvenient, it's the perfect hiding place. But before we dive into the evidence, we need to address the elephant in the room. When most people hear about underground civilizations, they immediately think of science fiction or internet conspiracy theories. That's exactly what makes this topic so intriguing. The idea has been systematically dismissed by mainstream academia, pushed to the fringes, labeled as fantasy. Yet when you strip away the sensationalism and look at the raw data, the historical accounts, and the unexplained phenomena, something remarkable emerges. Consider this. Every major culture on Earth has stories about people who live beneath the ground. Not metaphorical underworlds of the dead, but actual inhabited realms with advanced beings, sophisticated technology, and knowledge that surpasses surface dwellers. The Hopi speak of the ant people who sheltered their ancestors in underground chambers during global catastrophes. Hindu texts describe vast subterranean kingdoms with inhabitants who possessed flying vehicles and weapons that could level mountains. Tibetan traditions tell of hidden valleys that lead to realms where enlightened beings preserve ancient wisdom. These aren't vague myths. They contain specific geographical references, detailed descriptions of architecture, and consistent themes that appear across cultures that supposedly never had contact with each other. Now, you might argue that similar stories arising independently proves nothing except that humans tend to imagine similar things. But what if it proves the opposite? What if these stories persist because they're based on actual encounters, real places, and genuine historical events that have been slowly forgotten or deliberately obscured? The scientific revolution changed how we think about our planet. We developed models of Earth's interior based on seismic data and magnetic readings. These models show us layers: the crust, mantle, outer core, inner core, clean, simple, predictable. But here's what they don't show us: the spaces between, the vast cavities that could exist within the crust, the networks of tunnels that might connect distant regions, the chambers large enough to house entire cities. We know such spaces exist on a smaller scale. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky stretches for over 400 miles of mapped passages. Hang Son Doong in Vietnam contains chambers so large they could fit entire city blocks. These natural formations prove that massive underground spaces aren't just possible, they're commonplace. So why do we assume larger versions can't exist? The answer might be that we're looking in the wrong places with the wrong tools. Most geological surveys are designed to find oil, minerals, or assess earthquake risks. They're not equipped to detect artificial structures or inhabited spaces. It's like using a metal detector to search for wooden furniture. You're simply not going to find what you're looking for because your instrument wasn't designed for that purpose. But occasionally, our limited tools do pick up anomalies. Seismic readings that suggest hollow spaces where there should be solid rock. Magnetic field variations that don't match known geological patterns. Thermal signatures that indicate heat sources deep underground in regions where no such sources should exist. These anomalies are typically explained away as measurement errors, unusual mineral formations, or underground water systems. But what if some of them represent something else entirely? What if they're glimpses of a hidden infrastructure we're not supposed to see? Let's talk about the entrance problem. If underground civilizations exist, how do they remain hidden? The answer might be surprisingly simple: camouflage and selective access. Think about how military installations hide in plain sight. A mountain that looks perfectly natural from the outside might contain vast underground complexes. A seemingly ordinary hillside might conceal doorways that only open under specific conditions. Ancient texts often mention that certain entrances could only be found by those who possessed the right knowledge, the correct mental state, or who approached at precisely the right time. This isn't mystical nonsense. It's practical security. Any civilization that wanted to remain hidden would develop sophisticated methods to screen potential visitors. Consider the reports from modern explorers who claim to have encountered such entrances. Cave systems that suddenly become geometric, artificial-looking tunnels. Valleys where compasses spin wildly and electronic equipment malfunctions. Remote locations where travelers report seeing lights, structures, or people that vanish when approached. These accounts share common elements across different continents and time periods. The described architecture often involves seamless stone construction, walls that appear to glow with their own light, and passages that extend far beyond what natural cave systems should allow. The reported inhabitants are typically described as human-like, but taller, with refined features and clothing made from unfamiliar materials. Skeptics dismiss these as hallucinations, hoaxes, or misidentified natural phenomena. But the consistency of remarkable. Why the details is, would unconnected people across different cultures describe such similar experiences if they were simply making things up? The technology question is equally fascinating. How could an underground civilization develop and maintain advanced systems without surface contact? The answer might lie in energy sources we haven't fully explored. Geothermal energy could power vast underground installations. Underground rivers could provide water and transportation. Mineral deposits could supply raw materials for manufacturing. But perhaps most intriguingly, an underground civilization might have developed along completely different technological paths than surface dwellers. Instead of combustion engines and electronic devices, they might have perfected crystalline energy systems, magnetic levitation, or biological technologies we can barely imagine. This brings us to one of the most compelling aspects of the underground civilization theory. The idea that such a society might have solved problems that still plague surface humanity. Without the pressure of external threats, resource competition, or environmental degradation, an isolated civilization could have developed sustainable technologies, harmonious social systems, and long-term stability that surface cultures have never achieved. The implications are staggering. If such a civilization exists, it might possess solutions to climate change, energy crises, and social conflicts that have plagued humanity for millennia. It might have preserved knowledge from earlier epochs that we've lost to war, natural disasters, and cultural collapse. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. If underground civilizations exist and possess advanced knowledge, why haven't they made contact? Why do they remain hidden while surface humanity struggles with problems they might have solved long ago? The answer, according to various sources, is both simple and unsettling. They're waiting for surface humanity to prove it's ready for such knowledge, waiting for us to demonstrate that we won't use advanced technology for destruction, that we won't exploit their resources, that we won't destroy their carefully maintained civilization with our chaos and violence. From this perspective, the hidden civilization isn't just protecting itself, it's protecting us from ourselves, ensuring that transformative knowledge only emerges when we're mature enough to handle it responsibly. This creates a paradox that runs through every aspect of the underground civilization mystery. The very qualities that would make us worthy of contact, wisdom, restraint, harmony with nature, are precisely the qualities that our competitive, expansion-driven surface culture seems designed to suppress. Perhaps that's the real message hidden in all those ancient stories and modern encounters. The underground civilization isn't just a place you can find with the right map or equipment. It's a state of being, a level of consciousness, a way of living that must be achieved before the doors can open. Which brings us to the most important question of all. If such a civilization exists, how do we make contact? The answer might be more challenging than any physical expedition. The question of contact brings us face to face with humanity's oldest dilemma. Are we ready for knowledge that could fundamentally change everything? Because if the evidence suggests anything, it's that contact with underground civilizations isn't just a matter of finding the right cave entrance or decoding ancient maps. It's about reaching a threshold that most of surface humanity hasn't even begun to approach. Let's examine what we know about alleged contact attempts throughout history. The pattern is remarkably consistent across cultures and centuries. Contact, when it happens, is brief, selective, and almost always leaves the surface dweller fundamentally changed but unable to return. It's as if these encounters are designed to plant seeds rather than establish ongoing relationships. Take the account of Admiral Richard Byrd's Antarctic expedition in 1947. According to certain interpretations of his diary entries, Byrd claimed to have flown beyond the South Pole into a land of green valleys and warm air, where he encountered beings who warned about humanity's destructive path. Whether you believe the account or not, it follows the exact pattern we see in historical reports. Unexpected access, advanced beings expressing concern about surface civilization, and a return that leaves the explorer forever changed but isolated. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if contact attempts have been happening all along, but the contacted individuals are specifically chosen because they lack the power or credibility to fundamentally disrupt surface society? What if underground civilizations have been conducting a careful study of surface humanity for centuries, gathering data, assessing our development, waiting for signs that we're ready for more significant interaction? The screening process, if it exists, appears to be incredibly sophisticated. It's not enough to be brave, intelligent, or well-equipped. The selection criteria seem to involve something far more subtle, a combination of inner development, pure intention, and what ancient texts often describe as spiritual readiness. This brings us to the underground civilization theory. The role of the most intriguing aspects of consciousness itself as both a detection method and a barrier. Multiple sources suggest that the entrances to hidden realms aren't just physically concealed, they're vibrationally shielded. They exist at frequencies that most human consciousness can't access. Think about it this way. We know that reality contains far more information than our senses can process. We see only a tiny slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear only a narrow band of sound frequencies. What if entire dimensions of experience exist just beyond our normal perceptual range? What if underground civilizations have learned to exist in these spaces, invisible to surface dwellers, who haven't developed the necessary sensitivity. This isn't mystical speculation. Modern physics acknowledges that the universe contains forms of matter and energy we can't directly perceive. Dark matter makes up most of the cosmos, yet we can only detect it through its gravitational effects. If physical reality contains such hidden layers, why couldn't consciousness operate on multiple levels as well? The implications are staggering. It would mean that contact with underground civilizations isn't just about finding the right location. It's about developing the right state of awareness. It's about becoming the kind of person who can perceive what was always there, but remained invisible to ordinary consciousness. But here's where the story becomes even more complex. What if the underground civilizations aren't just hiding from us? What if they're actively managing our development, subtly influencing surface events to guide humanity toward the necessary evolutionary threshold? Look at the patterns in human technological development. Certain breakthrough discoveries appear simultaneously in multiple locations, developed by researchers who had no contact with each other. The mathematics of calculus emerged independently through Newton and Leibniz. Radio technology was developed by multiple inventors at nearly the same time. Even the atomic bomb was pursued by several nations simultaneously. Conventional history explains these synchronicities as inevitable results of accumulated knowledge reaching critical mass. But what if there's another explanation? What if key discoveries are being introduced into human consciousness at precisely the right moments by intelligences that understand both the technology and the timing required for safe implementation? This possibility transforms our entire understanding of human progress. Instead of seeing ourselves as the sole authors of our technological advancement, we might be participants in a carefully orchestrated educational process. The underground civilizations, if they exist, might be the hidden teachers, introducing new concepts gradually to prevent the kind of catastrophic misuse that could destroy surface civilization. Consider the environmental crisis we're facing today. Just as ecological collapse seemed inevitable, we began developing renewable energy technologies, sustainable agriculture methods, and global communication systems that allow unprecedented coordination of conservation efforts. The timing seems almost impossibly perfect, as if someone understood exactly when to introduce the tools we'd need for survival. But this raises an even more profound question. What happens when the student is ready for more advanced lessons? What occurs when surface humanity demonstrates the maturity to handle direct contact with their hidden teachers? The answer might lie in understanding what that maturity actually looks like. It's not technological sophistication. We're already incredibly advanced in that regard. It's not population size or global influence. We've achieved those milestones as well. Instead, the qualifying factors seem to be qualities that our current civilization struggles with. Genuine ecological harmony, sustainable resource use, peaceful conflict resolution, and the wisdom to prioritize long-term survival over short-term gain. From this perspective, the underground civilizations aren't withholding contact out of arrogance or fear. They're waiting for surface humanity to develop the characteristics that would make contact beneficial rather than destructive for both parties. This creates a feedback loop that explains why the hidden civilizations remain hidden. The more desperately surface humanity seeks contact, the more it demonstrates its unreadiness for such contact. The desire to exploit, to acquire, to dominate that drives most exploration efforts is precisely the mindset that disqualifies potential contact candidates. The real seekers, according to various accounts, are those who approach the mystery with different motivations. Genuine curiosity rather than acquisition, respect rather than conquest, patience rather than urgency. They're not trying to drag hidden knowledge into the surface world. They're trying to develop the qualities that would make them worthy citizens of both realms. This might explain why genuine contact experiences often occur to individuals who weren't specifically seeking them. The hermit who stumbles upon a hidden entrance while seeking solitude. the researcher who discovers anomalous readings while studying something completely unrelated, the indigenous elder who maintains traditional knowledge without trying to modernize or monetize it. These individuals share certain characteristics that might serve as a kind of natural selection for contact readiness. They tend to be comfortable with uncertainty, respectful of natural systems, and more interested in understanding than in controlling. They approach mysteries with reverence rather than arrogance. But perhaps most importantly, they're not trying to bring the underground world to the surface. They're trying to understand what would make them worthy of being invited deeper underground. This distinction might be the key to understanding why most expedition-based approaches to finding hidden civilizations fail. They're built on surface world assumptions about exploration and discovery, assumptions that the underground civilizations might find primitive or even dangerous. Instead of asking, how do we find them? The more relevant question might be, how do we become the kind of people they would want to find? Instead of developing better detection equipment, we might need to develop better detection consciousness. Instead of mapping physical entrances, we might need to map inner landscapes. This shift in approach doesn't mean abandoning rational investigation. It means expanding our definition of what constitutes valid evidence and legitimate research methodology. It means acknowledging that some discoveries might require personal transformation rather than technological advancement. The underground civilization mystery, viewed from this angle, becomes something far more significant than a simple question about hidden societies. It becomes a mirror that reflects our own developmental stage as a species. It becomes a measuring stick for human consciousness, a graduation test for planetary citizenship. And if that's true, then the most important expeditions aren't the ones that search remote caves or analyze satellite imagery. They're the ones that explore the depths of human potential, that investigate the frontiers of consciousness, that map the territory between what we are and what we might become. The evidence suggests that such explorations are already underway, conducted not by funded research teams, but by individuals who've recognized that the path to hidden civilizations might be an inner path as much as an outer one. The question becomes even more intriguing when we examine the physical evidence that mainstream archaeology prefers to ignore. Because while academic institutions dismiss underground civilization theories as pseudoscience, the geological record contains anomalies that demand explanation. Let's start with something concrete. The Derinkuyu underground city in Turkey, officially discovered in 1963, extends 18 levels deep into the earth and could house 20,000 people. When archaeologists first explored its tunnels, they found sophisticated ventilation systems, wine cellars, chapels, and defensive mechanisms that suggest its builders possessed advanced engineering knowledge. But here's what's truly remarkable. Derinkuyu is just one of over 200 underground cities discovered in the same region. These aren't crude shelters carved by desperate refugees. They're masterworks of subterranean architecture, featuring complex air circulation systems, water management networks, and defensive strategies that would challenge modern engineers. The construction techniques display a level of planning and expertise that seems impossible for the time periods when they were supposedly built. But Derinkuyu raises more questions than it answers. If ancient peoples could create such elaborate underground complexes, what prevented them from building even larger, more sophisticated versions? What if the cities we've discovered represent only the most basic examples of subterranean architecture, the equivalent of finding ancient mud huts, while vast underground metropolises remain hidden nearby? The geological surveys of these regions reveal something even more intriguing. Ground-penetrating radar has detected extensive void spaces beneath known archaeological sites, chambers and passages that extend far deeper than any officially recognized excavation. When researchers request permission to explore these deeper areas, their applications are routinely denied by authorities who cite safety concerns, environmental protection, or cultural preservation. This pattern of restricted access appears worldwide. In Peru, the Chavín de Huántar complex contains tunnels that local guides claim extend for miles underground, connecting to other ancient sites across vast distances. Yet archaeological teams are only permitted to explore the uppermost levels. The deeper passages remain off-limits, officially unexplored. Their secrets preserved by bureaucratic barriers rather than physical impossibility. Similar restrictions exist around the Giza Plateau in Egypt, where ground scanning technology has revealed multiple void spaces beneath the pyramids and Sphinx. These chambers appear on official surveys. Their existence is acknowledged by authorities, yet no public excavation attempts have been authorized. The discoveries remain classified, studied by select teams whose findings are never fully disclosed. The pattern suggests something more systematic than bureaucratic caution. It implies a coordinated effort to limit public knowledge of what lies beneath these sites. But by whom, and for what purpose? One possibility is that surface governments have already made contact with underground civilizations and are actively protecting their privacy. The restricted areas might be buffer zones, agreed upon boundaries that prevent accidental discovery by casual explorers. The official denials and scientific skepticism might be carefully maintained cover stories designed to discourage serious investigation. This theory gains credibility when you examine the resources devoted to deep Earth research. While space exploration receives massive public funding and media attention, projects that probe the deep underground operate with classified budgets and minimal publicity. The technology exists to explore miles beneath the surface, yet such capabilities are primarily used for military applications or resource extraction rather than archaeological discovery. Meanwhile, certain military installations around the world are built with underground components that extend far deeper than their stated purposes would require. NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain complex officially goes down several levels, but construction workers who built the facility have reported elevator systems that descend much further, accessing areas they were never allowed to see. These installations often coincide geographically with regions where underground civilization legends are strongest. Mount Shasta in California, long associated with hidden realm stories, sits near multiple classified military facilities. The Himalayas, where Tibetan traditions speak of concealed kingdoms, are dotted with restricted research stations operated by various governments. The coincidences multiply when you examine the career paths of individuals who've reported underground encounters. Many find themselves recruited into classified government positions shortly after their experiences. Others receive offers to join private research organizations that operate outside public oversight. Some simply disappear from public life entirely, their stories fading from circulation as if someone actively discouraged their continued testimony. Dr. Richard Sauder, one of the few researchers to systematically investigate underground military installations, documented how surface-level facilities often serve as covers for much larger subterranean complexes. His work revealed construction contracts for underground cities capable of housing thousands of people, built with technologies that far exceed what's available to civilian engineers. But Sauder's research raises an uncomfortable question. If surface governments can build such elaborate underground facilities, what's to prevent them from discovering naturally occurring underground civilizations? And if such discoveries have been made, why maintain absolute secrecy rather than treating contact as the greatest scientific breakthrough in human history? The answer might lie in understanding what such contact would mean for existing power structures. An underground civilization that had solved problems of energy, agriculture, governance, and environmental sustainability would represent a fundamental challenge to every institution that derives authority from managing those problems on the surface. Imagine the disruption if humanity suddenly gained access to unlimited clean energy, sustainable food production, or conflict resolution methods that made warfare obsolete. Every government, corporation, and organization that profits from scarcity, environmental destruction, or social conflict would face immediate obsolescence. From this perspective, maintaining secrecy about underground civilizations isn't just about protecting the hidden societies. It's about protecting the surface world's existing order from revolutionary change that could occur too rapidly for institutions to adapt. But this protective secrecy creates its own problems. By preventing open contact, surface authorities might be inadvertently blocking humanity's access to solutions for crises that threaten global survival. Climate change, resource depletion, and social instability continue to escalate, while potential answers remain locked away in classified files or hidden chambers. The ethical implications are staggering. If underground civilizations possess knowledge that could prevent ecological collapse or end human suffering, do surface governments have the right to maintain secrecy? Are they protecting stability or perpetuating problems that hidden knowledge could solve? These questions become even more complex when you consider that underground civilizations might have their own reasons for limiting contact. Perhaps they've observed surface humanity's tendency to weaponize every discovery, to exploit every resource, to turn every advantage into a tool for domination. Perhaps their secrecy isn't imposed by surface governments, but chosen by the hidden societies themselves. Ancient texts often describe underground dwellers as possessing great wisdom, but also great caution about sharing that wisdom with surface populations they consider immature or dangerous. The Hindu Puranas speak of beings who withdrew underground specifically to avoid contamination by surface world conflicts and corruptions. If such beings exist today, they might view surface humanity's current development with deep concern. Our technological capabilities have advanced far beyond our ethical development. We possess weapons that could destroy all life on Earth, yet we struggle with basic concepts of cooperation, sustainability, and long-term thinking. From an underground civilization's perspective, making contact with surface humanity in its current state might be like giving loaded weapons to children. The potential for catastrophic misuse might far outweigh any possible benefits. This creates a paradox that runs through every aspect of the underground civilization mystery. The very desperation with which surface humanity seeks advanced knowledge might prove our unreadiness to receive it. The more aggressively we search for hidden wisdom, the more we demonstrate the aggressive mindset that makes us unsuitable recipients of such wisdom. The solution, according to various esoteric traditions, isn't to search harder or develop better detection equipment. It's to transform ourselves into the kind of beings that hidden civilizations would want to contact. It's to develop the qualities that would make us worthy of trust rather than suspicion. But what would such transformation actually look like? What would humanity need to become to earn contact with beings who've presumably transcended the problems that still plague surface civilization? The answer might already be emerging in certain segments of human society, in individuals and communities that have begun demonstrating the qualities that underground civilizations might be looking for. These aren't necessarily the most technologically advanced or politically powerful groups. Instead, they're the ones that have learned to live sustainably, to resolve conflicts peacefully, and to prioritize collective well-being over individual advantage. Indigenous communities that have maintained traditional ecological knowledge. Scientific researchers who pursue understanding rather than profit. Spiritual practitioners who've developed genuine wisdom rather than mere belief systems. Social innovators who've created harmonious communities that could serve as models for larger societies. Perhaps these individuals and groups represent humanity's application process for admission to a larger galactic or terrestrial community. Perhaps they're unknowingly demonstrating the qualifications that would make surface humanity acceptable contact candidates. And perhaps, in remote locations around the world, representatives of underground civilizations are carefully observing these developments, taking notes, waiting to see if surface humanity can indeed evolve beyond its current limitations. The evidence suggests that such observation might already be underway, conducted through methods so subtle that most surface dwellers never realize they're being evaluated. The observation methods employed by these hypothetical underground civilizations might be far more sophisticated than anything we've imagined. Consider the reports from researchers who've experienced what they describe as impossible synchronicities while investigating subterranean mysteries. Equipment failures that occur at precisely the moment they're about to make a significant discovery. Weather patterns that shift dramatically just as expeditions reach critical locations. Local guides who suddenly refuse to continue, claiming they've received warnings in dreams. These aren't isolated incidents. They follow patterns that suggest intelligent intervention rather than random coincidence. It's as if someone is monitoring surface investigations and taking subtle action to prevent discoveries that might occur before the proper time. Dr. Stephen Greer's work with consciousness-based contact protocols has revealed something fascinating about how advanced civilizations might evaluate potential contact candidates. His research suggests that the most successful encounters occur not through technological detection methods, but through what he calls coherent thought sequencing, essentially broadcasting mental intentions that demonstrate peaceful, scientific curiosity rather than exploitative motives. The implications are staggering. If underground civilizations possess the ability to monitor human consciousness itself, they could be conducting real-time psychological evaluations of every person who approaches their territories. They wouldn't need to rely on physical observation or technological surveillance. They could simply read the intentions, fears, and motivations of surface dwellers directly from their mental patterns. This would explain why contact experiences often seem to involve a kind of consciousness filtering. The individuals who report successful encounters typically describe a profound shift in their mental state just before the experience begins. They speak of sudden clarity, unusual calmness, or a sense of being tuned to a different frequency of reality. What's particularly intriguing is how this consciousness-based screening process might work in practice. Imagine approaching a hidden entrance with thoughts of exploitation, fame, or profit. Your mental patterns would immediately identify you as unsuitable for contact. The entrance might literally become invisible to your perception, or you might find yourself turned around and walking away without conscious decision. But approach the same location with genuine reverence, scientific curiosity, and respect for whatever you might discover, and entirely different possibilities might open. The entrance might reveal itself. Guides might appear, or you might suddenly understand information that was always present but previously incomprehensible. This selective visibility based on consciousness states isn't just mystical speculation. Quantum physics has demonstrated that observation itself affects reality at fundamental levels. If consciousness plays a role in determining what becomes manifest in physical reality, then advanced beings who understand these principles could literally control what different observers are capable of perceiving. The technology required for such selective manifestation might be based on principles we're only beginning to discover. Research into quantum entanglement, morphic fields, and consciousness-matter interaction suggests that reality is far more malleable than classical physics assumed. An underground civilization that had millennia to develop these sciences might have capabilities that seem magical to surface dwellers, but are actually sophisticated applications of natural laws. Consider the reports from Tibetan monasteries where certain chambers are said to be visible only to individuals who have achieved specific levels of spiritual development. These aren't metaphorical descriptions. The monks speak of actual architectural spaces that exist for some people, but not for others, depending on their state of consciousness. Western researchers who've investigated these claims often dismiss them as cultural mythology or misunderstood symbolism. But what if they're literal descriptions of technology that operates through consciousness-matter interaction? What if underground civilizations have developed architectural systems that phase in and out of physical reality based on the observer's mental state? The archaeological evidence for such technology might be hiding in plain sight. Consider the precision-cut stones at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, where granite blocks weighing hundreds of tons are fitted together with tolerances measured in millimeters. The construction techniques required for such precision don't exist in conventional engineering, yet the structures clearly demonstrate that someone possessed the necessary capabilities. Mainstream archaeology attributes these achievements to lost conventional technologies, sophisticated tools and techniques that were forgotten after the civilizations collapsed. But what if the technologies weren't conventional at all? What if they were consciousness-based methods that allowed builders to manipulate matter directly through focused mental intention? Indigenous traditions from around the world contain references to such capabilities. The builders of these monuments are often described as possessing abilities that transcended normal physical limitations. They could move massive stones through mental power, shape rock as if it were clay, and create architectural features that defied conventional engineering principles. These descriptions might not be mythological embellishments. They might be accurate accounts of technologies that operated through entirely different principles than our current scientific paradigms recognize. And if such technologies existed in the past, they might still exist today in the hidden realms that surface dwellers can't access. The energy requirements for consciousness-based technologies might explain why underground civilizations could develop and maintain advanced capabilities without the massive infrastructure that surface technologies require. Instead of building power plants, transmission networks, and manufacturing facilities, they might have learned to draw energy directly from planetary fields, human consciousness, or quantum vacuum fluctuations. Recent discoveries in zero-point energy research suggest that enormous amounts of power exist in apparently empty space. If underground civilizations had learned to tap these energy sources thousands of years ago, they could power technologies that seem impossible by surface standards while leaving virtually no detectable footprint. This invisible energy infrastructure might explain the reports from sensitives who describe feeling charged or energetically affected when visiting certain locations associated with underground civilization legends. They're not experiencing psychological placebo effects. They're detecting actual energy fields that most people can't perceive, but that indicate the presence of technologies operating on principles surface science hasn't discovered. The implications extend far beyond hidden civilizations. If consciousness-based technologies are possible, they represent a completely different pathway for human development. Instead of building increasingly complex mechanical and electronic systems, we might learn to interface directly with the fundamental forces that shape reality. Such capabilities would revolutionize every aspect of human existence. Transportation could occur through consciousness projection rather than physical vehicles. Communication could happen through direct mind-to-mind contact rather than electronic networks. Manufacturing could involve shaping matter through focused intention rather than industrial processes. But developing these capabilities might require the same consciousness evolution that underground civilizations apparently demand from potential contact candidates. The technologies might be inherently safe, because they only function for individuals who've achieved the wisdom and emotional stability necessary to use them responsibly. This creates a natural safeguard against the misuse of advanced capabilities. Unlike mechanical technologies that can be operated by anyone regardless of their psychological development, consciousness-based technologies might be self-limiting. They would automatically exclude individuals whose mental patterns indicate potential for destructive application. From this perspective, the consciousness screening that underground civilizations apparently employ isn't just about protecting their privacy. It's about ensuring that advanced technologies are only shared with individuals who've demonstrated the internal development necessary to handle them safely. The screening process itself might serve as a kind of evolutionary catalyst for surface humanity. By setting consciousness-based criteria for contact, underground civilizations might be encouraging the development of precisely the mental and emotional qualities that would enable surface dwellers to transcend their current limitations. This suggests that the real purpose of underground civilizations might not be to remain hidden indefinitely. It might be to serve as a kind of evolutionary goal, a demonstration of what human consciousness could become if it developed along different pathways than surface civilization has followed. The contact experiences that do occur might be carefully calibrated teaching encounters, designed to plant seeds of possibility in individuals who are capable of nurturing those seeds into larger transformations. Each contact might be intended not just to inform the individual, but to influence the broader development of surface consciousness through that person's subsequent actions and insights. The accounts of individuals who claim contact with underground beings often describe receiving information that they couldn't fully understand at the time, but that became meaningful years later as their own development progressed. This suggests a kind of time-release teaching methodology where advanced knowledge is introduced in forms that will unfold naturally as the recipient becomes capable of integrating increasingly sophisticated concepts. Such teaching methods would be necessary when dealing with the vast consciousness gap between surface dwellers and beings who've had millennia to develop their mental capabilities. Direct knowledge transfer might be impossible or dangerous. Instead, the teaching would need to occur through gradual consciousness expansion that allows surface individuals to discover advanced concepts through their own developmental process. This gradual awakening approach might explain why underground civilization knowledge tends to emerge through mystical or spiritual traditions, rather than through conventional scientific channels. The information might be too consciousness-dependent to be understood through purely intellectual analysis. It might require personal transformation before it becomes comprehensible. The mystical traditions that claim contact with hidden masters or underground teachers might not be describing supernatural encounters. They might be documenting actual educational relationships with members of underground civilizations who serve as consciousness development specialists for promising surface dwellers. These relationships could explain the sudden leaps in understanding that characterize many spiritual and scientific breakthroughs. Instead of gradual intellectual development, individuals sometimes experience quantum jumps in comprehension that seem to come from sources beyond their normal learning processes. The recipients of such knowledge often describe the experience as remembering rather than learning, as if the information was already present in their consciousness and simply needed to be activated. This suggests that underground civilizations might work with dormant capabilities that exist in all human consciousness, but remain undeveloped in surface populations. If this is accurate, then contact with underground civilizations isn't about receiving external knowledge. It's about awakening capabilities that are inherent in human consciousness, but have been suppressed by surface world conditions and belief systems. The suppression might not be accidental. Surface civilizations' emphasis on external technologies, competitive individualism, and materialistic values might actively inhibit the development of consciousness-based capabilities that could threaten existing power structures. From this perspective, underground civilizations aren't just hiding from surface authorities. They're preserving developmental pathways that surface civilization has abandoned or forgotten. They're maintaining knowledge of what human consciousness could become if it developed in harmony with natural principles rather than in opposition to them. The preservation of these alternative development paths might be the underground civilization's primary mission. They're not just protecting themselves from surface world chaos. They're protecting possibilities for human evolution that could be lost if surface civilization continues on its current trajectory. But protection alone isn't sufficient. At some point, these preserved possibilities need to be reintroduced to surface populations to prevent the complete loss of consciousness capabilities that might be essential for species survival. The timing of such reintroduction might be approaching rapidly. Climate change, resource depletion, and social instability are creating conditions that could force surface civilization to either evolve or collapse. If underground civilizations have been waiting for a moment when surface humanity would be motivated to embrace alternative development paths, that moment might be arriving. The question is whether surface humanity can develop the necessary receptivity quickly enough to benefit from contact when it becomes available. The consciousness evolution required might be the most urgent challenge facing our species. more critical even than solving our environmental and social problems. Because if underground civilizations exist and possess solutions to surface world crises, accessing those solutions might depend entirely on our ability to meet consciousness-based contact criteria that we're only beginning to understand. The emergence of consciousness-based contact protocols in recent decades might represent the beginning of a systematic preparation process. Research centers around the world have begun documenting phenomena that suggest the boundaries between surface and underground realities are becoming increasingly permeable. The Institute of Noetic Sciences has catalogued thousands of reports describing encounters with non-ordinary intelligences that provide information about advanced technologies, healing methods, and social organization principles. What's remarkable about these reports is their consistency across different geographical regions and cultural backgrounds. The entities described in these encounters often claim to represent civilizations that withdrew from surface interaction centuries or millennia ago, but maintain observation posts for monitoring human development. They describe themselves as teachers rather than rulers, guides rather than saviors, and consistently emphasize that surface humanity must evolve its consciousness before more direct assistance can be provided. These communications often include specific instructions for consciousness development practices that could accelerate individual and collective evolution, meditation techniques that enhance perception of subtle energies, dietary recommendations that optimize neural functioning, social organization principles that reduce conflict and enhance cooperation. What's particularly intriguing is that individuals who implement these recommendations often report enhanced intuitive capabilities, increased psychic sensitivity, and occasional direct contact experiences with the source intelligences. It's as if following the consciousness development protocols creates the necessary conditions for more advanced forms of communication. Dr. Christopher Batch's research into transpersonal consciousness has documented how individuals who achieve certain states of awareness begin accessing information that appears to come from collective intelligence networks rather than individual minds. These networks seem to operate according to principles that underground civilization accounts have described for centuries. The information accessed through these networks often relates to solutions for problems that surface civilization hasn't been able to solve through conventional approaches. Environmental restoration techniques that work with natural systems rather than against them. Energy generation methods that don't require destructive extraction processes. Governance models that eliminate the corruption and inefficiency that plague current political systems. But the most significant information concerns human potential itself. The network communications consistently describe capabilities that all humans possess, but few have learned to access. Abilities to perceive and interact with subtle energy fields. Capacities for direct mind-to-mind communication. Skills for influencing physical reality through focused consciousness. These descriptions match remarkably well with the capabilities that indigenous traditions attribute to their most advanced practitioners. Shamans who can communicate with plant and animal consciousness. Healers who can diagnose and treat illness through energy perception. Weather workers who can influence atmospheric conditions through mental focus. The consistency across cultures and time periods suggests that these capabilities aren't supernatural gifts possessed by rare individuals. They're natural human potentials that become available when consciousness develops beyond the limitations that surface civilization typically imposes. The limitations might be more artificial than we've realized. Educational systems that emphasize intellectual analysis over intuitive perception. Social structures that reward competition over cooperation. Economic models that prioritize individual accumulation over collective well-being. These systems might not just be inefficient or unfair. They might actively suppress the consciousness development that would make contact with underground civilizations possible. They might be maintaining the isolation that keeps surface humanity from accessing the knowledge and assistance that hidden societies could provide. From this perspective, the real barriers to contact aren't geographical or technological. They're psychological and cultural. The underground civilizations aren't hiding from our detection equipment. They're waiting for us to develop beyond the mindset that would make detection equipment seem necessary. This suggests that the most effective approach to establishing contact might involve transforming surface civilization itself rather than searching for hidden entrances or developing better scanning technologies. Instead of trying to find underground civilizations, we might need to become the kind of civilization they would want to contact. The transformation would need to be comprehensive, affecting not just individual consciousness, but the entire social, economic, and political framework of surface society. It would require moving beyond competitive individualism toward cooperative collectivism, beyond exploitative resource use toward regenerative sustainability, beyond authoritarian governance toward wisdom-based decision-making. Such changes might seem impossible given current global conditions. But crisis often catalyzes evolution. The environmental, social, and spiritual crises facing surface humanity might create exactly the conditions necessary for rapid consciousness development and cultural transformation. Underground civilizations might have been waiting for precisely these conditions to emerge, not because they want surface humanity to suffer, but because crisis creates the motivation for change that comfort never provides. The breakdown of current systems might be the necessary precursor to breakthrough into new possibilities. The timing of this potential transformation might explain the increase in underground civilization accounts in recent decades. As surface conditions approach critical thresholds, hidden societies might be preparing for more direct intervention, or at least more obvious availability for those who develop the necessary receptivity. The preparation might already be underway through what appear to be separate, but might actually be coordinated developments. The growth of consciousness research in academic institutions, the emergence of sustainable technology solutions just when they're desperately needed, the proliferation of wisdom traditions and spiritual practices that enhance human potential. These developments might not be random historical coincidences. They might represent a carefully orchestrated awakening process designed to prepare surface humanity for contact with civilizations that have been waiting centuries for this moment to arrive. The question is whether we can complete the necessary consciousness evolution quickly enough to meet the opportunity when it presents itself fully. The window might be limited by the same crises that are motivating the transformation. If surface civilization collapses before it evolves, the opportunity for contact might be lost for centuries or millennia. But if the transformation succeeds, if surface humanity can develop the consciousness capabilities that underground civilizations apparently require for contact, then we might be on the verge of the greatest expansion in human knowledge and capability in recorded history. The evidence suggests that this transformation isn't just possible, but might already be beginning. In communities around the world, individuals and groups are demonstrating the qualities that could make contact possible. Genuine ecological consciousness, sustainable lifestyle practices, peaceful conflict resolution, and expanded awareness capabilities. These pioneers might represent the advance guard of a species-wide evolution that could ultimately bridge the gap between surface and underground civilizations. They might be the first humans in millennia to achieve the consciousness development that would make them acceptable candidates for direct contact with the hidden societies that have been waiting and watching for so long. And if that contact occurs, if the barriers between surface and underground finally dissolve, then everything we think we know about human history, capability, and destiny might need to be completely reconsidered. The implications of successful contact extend far beyond the exchange of knowledge between surface and underground societies. They touch the very core of what it means to be human in an interconnected cosmos, where consciousness itself might be the primary organizing principle of reality. Consider what we know about human potential when it's not constrained by surface civilization's limiting beliefs. Throughout history, certain individuals have demonstrated capabilities that suggest our species possesses dormant faculties far beyond what we consider normal. Tibetan monks who can raise their body temperature through mental focus alone. Aboriginal trackers who can sense water sources from miles away. Shamans who accurately predict weather patterns through intuitive connection with natural systems. These aren't supernatural phenomena. They're examples of consciousness operating at levels that surface education systems neither recognize nor cultivate. If underground civilizations have spent millennia developing these natural human capabilities, their level of consciousness might be as far beyond ours as ours is beyond that of early hominids. The contact accounts that do emerge often describe this consciousness gap in vivid terms. Surface dwellers report feeling like children in the presence of underground beings, not because they're treated condescendingly, but because they suddenly recognize how much of reality they've been unable to perceive. It's as if they've been living in a single room of an enormous mansion, completely unaware that countless other spaces existed just beyond their limited awareness. This expanded perception apparently isn't just philosophical or spiritual. It has practical implications for every aspect of existence. When consciousness can directly interface with the fundamental forces that shape physical reality, the distinction between thought and action becomes meaningless. Intention becomes creation. Imagination becomes manifestation. The technologies that emerge from this consciousness, matter integration, would revolutionize human civilization in ways we can barely comprehend. Transportation that occurs through space-time manipulation rather than mechanical propulsion. Communication that happens through quantum entanglement rather than electromagnetic transmission. Manufacturing that involves organizing matter at the molecular level through directed consciousness rather than industrial assembly processes. But perhaps most significantly, healing that addresses the consciousness patterns that create illness rather than just treating physical symptoms. If disease originates in distorted thought patterns or emotional imbalances, then beings who can perceive and correct these distortions at their source could eliminate suffering in ways that surface medicine cannot imagine. The social implications are equally transformative. When individual consciousness can access collective intelligence networks, the isolation and competition that drive surface world conflicts become obsolete. Cooperation becomes natural because individual well-being is recognized as inseparable from collective well-being. Deception becomes impossible because mental intentions are transparently perceivable. Governance in such societies would operate through consensus based on shared access to information rather than through authority based on control of information. Economic systems would focus on optimizing collective capabilities rather than accumulating individual resources. Educational processes would involve awakening inherent potentials rather than installing external knowledge. These aren't utopian fantasies. They're logical extensions of consciousness capabilities that surface humans already demonstrate in limited forms. We know that meditation can enhance mental functioning. We know that collective intention can influence physical systems. We know that emotional states affect health outcomes. Underground civilizations might simply represent what becomes possible when these capabilities are fully developed and systematically applied. The development process apparently requires specific environmental conditions that surface civilization has systematically eliminated. Prolonged periods of inner quiet that allow subtle perceptions to emerge. Communities that support consciousness exploration rather than suppressing it. Educational approaches that cultivate intuitive wisdom alongside analytical intelligence. Most importantly, it requires releasing the fear-based mindset that drives competitive individualism and replacing it with the trust-based awareness that enables cooperative consciousness. This might be the most challenging aspect of the transformation for surface dwellers who've been conditioned to view others as threats to their survival rather than as extensions of their own being. The conditioning runs deep, embedded in economic systems that reward exploitation, political structures that maintain power through division, and social norms that equate success with domination. Breaking free from these patterns might require more than individual effort. It might require collective awakening that transforms the entire cultural context in which consciousness development occurs. This collective awakening might already be underway, manifesting through phenomena that appear unconnected, but might actually represent different aspects of the same underlying transformation. The rapid growth of consciousness research in universities worldwide, the emergence of technologies that work with natural systems rather than against them, the proliferation of practices that enhance human potential rather than exploiting human limitations. The timing of these developments might not be coincidental. If underground civilizations have been monitoring surface evolution, they would understand precisely when to introduce catalytic influences that could accelerate the necessary changes. They wouldn't force transformation, but they might create conditions that make transformation more likely to occur naturally. These conditions might include the current convergence of crises that are forcing surface humanity to question fundamental assumptions about how reality works. Climate disruption that demands new relationships with natural systems. Economic instability that reveals the unsustainability of exploitation-based models. Social fragmentation that highlights the need for more effective cooperation methods. Each crisis contains within it the seeds of evolutionary solutions that could align surface civilization with the principles that underground societies apparently embody. But recognizing and implementing these solutions requires exactly the consciousness development that could make contact possible. The feedback loop is elegant and might be intentionally designed. The same consciousness evolution that would solve surface world problems would also qualify surface humanity for contact with civilizations that possess even more advanced solutions. The process of becoming ready for contact is identical to the process of transcending the limitations that make contact seem necessary. This suggests that underground civilizations aren't waiting to rescue surface humanity from its problems. They're waiting for surface humanity to develop the capabilities that would make rescue unnecessary. They're not hiding advanced technologies that could fix our broken systems. They're preserving consciousness development methods that could help us create systems that don't break in the first place. The preservation might be the most crucial service they could provide. If surface civilization continues on its current trajectory, it might completely lose access to consciousness capabilities that took millennia to develop. The knowledge of how to live in harmony with natural systems, how to organize societies without corruption, how to develop technology that enhances rather than diminishes human potential. These capabilities might be encoded in human DNA, but require specific activation conditions that surface civilization has systematically eliminated. Underground societies might serve as living libraries, maintaining the environmental and cultural conditions necessary to keep these potentials accessible until surface populations develop the wisdom to reintegrate them. The reintegration process might already be beginning through individuals who seem to spontaneously develop capabilities that surface education never taught them. Children who display unusual sensitivity to energy fields. Adults who suddenly access healing abilities without formal training. Scientists who receive breakthrough insights through non-rational means. These spontaneous awakenings might represent genetic activations triggered by changing planetary conditions or by proximity to consciousness fields maintained by underground civilizations. They might be the first indicators that the barriers between surface and underground realities are beginning to dissolve. As the barriers weaken, more individuals might find themselves experiencing phenomena that don't fit surface world paradigms, dreams that provide accurate information about distant events, intuitive insights that solve technical problems, healing experiences that occur through consciousness alone. Rather than dismissing these experiences as hallucinations or coincidences, we might need to recognize them as evidence that human consciousness is beginning to function at levels that underground civilizations have maintained for centuries. The anomalies might be glimpses of our own evolutionary future. The future might arrive more quickly than anyone expects. If consciousness evolution can occur through quantum leaps rather than gradual development, entire populations might undergo rapid transformation when critical mass conditions are achieved. The scattered individuals who are already demonstrating advanced capabilities might be the nucleation points around which larger awakenings crystallize. The crystallization might create exactly the conditions that underground civilizations have been waiting for. Not just individual readiness, but collective readiness. Not just personal consciousness development, but species-wide evolution that would make surface humanity qualified for membership in whatever larger community of consciousness exists on this planet. And when that membership becomes available, when the doors between worlds finally open fully, everything we thought we knew about human limits, planetary history, and our place in the cosmos might transform overnight into something far more magnificent than we ever dared imagine. The transformation might be closer than we think. The evidence suggests that we're living through the preliminary stages of the most significant evolutionary leap in human history. The question isn't whether it will happen, but whether we can prepare ourselves to participate consciously in our own metamorphosis into something worthy of contact with the greatest civilization Earth has ever produced. But as we stand on the threshold of this potential transformation, we must confront the most challenging aspect of the entire underground civilization mystery, the question of what contact would actually cost us. Because every account, every legend, every whispered story about successful encounters carries the same underlying message. Contact changes you in ways that make it impossible to return to your previous understanding of reality. Think about what that means for a moment. We spend our entire lives building identities, careers, relationships, all based on the assumption that the world works according to certain fundamental rules. We believe in solid matter, linear time, limited human potential. We organize our societies around scarcity, competition, and the idea that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry. But what happens when you suddenly know, not just believe, but know with absolute certainty that all of these assumptions are wrong? What happens when you've seen matter respond to thought, experienced time as malleable, witnessed human consciousness operating at levels that make our greatest achievements seem primitive? The psychological impact alone could be devastating. Imagine returning to surface civilization after experiencing a realm where war is impossible because everyone can perceive each other's true intentions, where environmental destruction is unthinkable because consciousness is recognized as part of the living systems it inhabits, where poverty and disease are extinct because the fundamental causes have been understood and eliminated. How do you go back to paying taxes for weapons systems when you've seen what true security looks like? How do you participate in economic systems based on artificial scarcity when you've witnessed abundance created through consciousness alone? How do you maintain relationships built on partial truths when you've experienced the intimacy of complete transparency? This might explain why contact experiences are often described as both the most wonderful and most isolating events in people's lives. They return to surface world with knowledge that makes previous concerns seem trivial, yet they're surrounded by people who consider those concerns the most important things in existence. The isolation isn't just social. It's philosophical, emotional, spiritual. You become a citizen of a reality that most of humanity doesn't acknowledge exists. You carry memories of a world that operates according to principles your own culture considers impossible. You've touched something magnificent, but you can't share it because the language doesn't exist to convey what you've experienced. Some contact experiences report that this isolation is temporary, that it gradually transforms into a kind of patient compassion for humanity's current developmental stage. They begin to understand that surface civilization isn't wrong or evil, it's simply young, like watching children play games that seem incredibly important to them, but that you recognize as preparation for more complex activities they're not yet ready to understand. But others report that the isolation never fully resolves. They spend the rest of their lives feeling like strangers in their own world, carrying knowledge they can't use because the context for applying it doesn't exist in surface civilization. They become bridges between worlds, but bridges that can never fully belong to either side. This might be why underground civilizations are so selective about who they contact. It's not just about protecting their own security or ensuring that advanced knowledge isn't misused. It's about protecting potential contact candidates from an experience that could destroy their ability to function in surface society without providing them with viable alternatives. The selectivity might also explain why contact often occurs to individuals who are already somewhat isolated from mainstream society. Hermits, researchers working in remote locations, spiritual practitioners who've already begun questioning consensus reality. These people have less to lose from having their worldview completely overturned, because they've already begun the process of stepping outside conventional frameworks. But there's another possibility that's both more hopeful and more challenging. What if the isolation experienced by contact candidates isn't permanent? What if it's a temporary transition phase that occurs while surface consciousness adapts to expanded awareness? What if the real purpose of individual contact experiences is to create enough awakened individuals to reach a critical mass that could transform collective consciousness? From this perspective, contact experiences aren't isolated anomalies. They're pioneers, advanced scouts for a species-wide evolution that will eventually eliminate the gap between surface and underground awareness. Their temporary isolation serves a larger purpose, demonstrating that human consciousness can indeed function at levels that make contact possible. The demonstration might be more important than we realize. If underground civilizations are waiting for evidence that surface humanity can handle expanded awareness, then each successful contact experience provides data about our species' readiness for larger transformations. Each individual who integrates contact without losing their sanity or becoming completely dysfunctional proves that the necessary evolution is possible. But integration requires more than just individual resilience. It requires social context that can support expanded awareness rather than suppressing it. Communities that recognize consciousness development as valuable rather than threatening. Economic systems that can function with people who've transcended competitive motivations. Educational institutions that can work with individuals who've accessed knowledge through non-conventional means. These supportive contexts might need to emerge before large-scale contact becomes possible. Not because underground civilizations lack the ability to handle resistant populations, but because contact that occurs before proper preparation could cause more harm than benefit for both sides. The preparation might already be underway through what appears to be unrelated social developments. The growth of consciousness research in mainstream institutions. The emergence of cooperative business models that prioritize collective well-being over profit maximization. The proliferation of educational approaches that integrate analytical thinking with intuitive development. Alternative communities are forming around principles that mirror what contact experiences describe about underground societies. Intentional communities that make decisions through consensus rather than authority. Eco-villages that demonstrate sustainable relationships with natural systems. Spiritual communities that support individual development while maintaining collective coherence. These communities might serve as testing grounds for social models that could eventually scale up to accommodate the changes that contact would bring. They're developing practical experience with governance, economics, and social organization based on expanded consciousness rather than fear-based competition. The testing is crucial because contact wouldn't just affect individuals. It would transform entire societies. If underground civilizations possess technologies that make current industrial systems obsolete, if they have social models that eliminate the conflicts that drive political structures, if they've developed economic principles that make wealth accumulation meaningless, then contact would trigger the most comprehensive social reorganization in human history. The reorganization couldn't happen overnight without causing massive disruption. But it might occur gradually through the influence of individuals and communities that have already begun demonstrating post-contact consciousness. Each person who integrates expanded awareness becomes a seed point for transformation that spreads through their interactions with others. The spreading might follow patterns that consciousness researchers have begun to identify. Studies of collective behavior show that when a small percentage of a population adopts new patterns, those patterns can rapidly become dominant throughout the entire group. The threshold is typically around 10 to 15% of the population. If consciousness evolution follows similar patterns, then widespread contact might become possible when 10 to 15% of surface humanity has developed the awareness levels that underground civilizations require. We might be approaching that threshold faster than anyone realizes, especially if current global crises continue to motivate consciousness development at accelerating rates. The acceleration might explain the increasing frequency of contact reports in recent decades. As surface humanity approaches the necessary threshold, underground civilizations might be increasing their interaction rates to help catalyze the final stages of the preparation process. But they might also be preparing for the possibility that surface civilization could collapse before reaching the necessary consciousness levels. If environmental, economic, or social breakdowns occur before sufficient awareness development, the opportunity for peaceful contact might be lost for centuries or millennia. This creates an urgency that permeates many contact accounts. The beings encountered often emphasize that surface humanity is approaching a critical decision point where it will either evolve rapidly or face catastrophic regression. They describe themselves as offering assistance, but only for those who demonstrate readiness to receive it constructively. The assistance apparently isn't rescue from external problems. It's guidance for internal development that would enable surface humanity to solve its own problems through expanded consciousness. The underground civilizations aren't waiting to save us from ourselves. They're waiting for us to develop the capabilities that would make salvation unnecessary. The development requires exactly the qualities that make individuals suitable for contact: genuine ecological consciousness, cooperative social orientation, and the wisdom to prioritize long-term collective well-being over short-term individual advantage. These aren't just moral requirements. They're practical prerequisites for consciousness that can interface safely with the technologies and social systems that advanced civilizations employ. Without these qualities, contact could be catastrophic. Advanced technologies in the hands of beings who haven't transcended competitive motivations could lead to conflicts far more destructive than anything surface civilization has experienced. Social models based on transparency and cooperation could collapse instantly if applied to populations that still operate through deception and manipulation. The screening process that underground civilizations apparently employ protects everyone involved. It ensures that contact occurs only when it can be beneficial rather than destructive, only when surface consciousness has evolved enough to handle the transformations that contact would bring. But the screening also means that contact remains tantalizingly out of reach for most of surface humanity. We can glimpse the possibility, study the accounts, analyze the evidence, but we can't force the encounter that would transform everything. We can only work on becoming the kinds of beings that such an encounter would enhance rather than destroy. The work isn't just individual, it's collective, cultural, civilizational. We need to transform not just our own consciousness, but the social contexts that shape how consciousness develops. We need to create communities, institutions, and systems that support the evolution that could make contact possible. The creation of these new contexts might be the most important work we can do, more crucial than searching for hidden entrances or developing better detection technologies. Because when the contexts are ready, when surface civilization has evolved enough to handle contact responsibly, The underground civilizations might emerge on their own. They might reveal themselves not because we've found them, but because we've finally become worthy of being found. Not because we've solved the mystery of their location, but because we've solved the mystery of what we need to become to deserve their trust. And when that trust is earned, when the barriers between worlds finally dissolve completely, we might discover that the greatest civilization on Earth was never really hidden at all. It was simply waiting for us to develop eyes capable of seeing it, minds capable of comprehending it, and hearts capable of joining it in the magnificent work of consciousness evolution that spans not just our planet, but the entire cosmos. The cosmos itself might be far more populated with consciousness than we've ever imagined. If underground civilizations exist on Earth, similar societies might exist throughout the universe, all connected through networks of awareness that transcend physical space and linear time. Contact with Earth's hidden civilizations might not just transform our planet, but initiate us into a galactic community of consciousness that we never knew existed. The initiation would represent the ultimate graduation from our current level of existence, no longer isolated on a single world, struggling with problems that more advanced beings solved millennia ago. Instead, we'd become participants in projects of consciousness development that span solar systems, contributors to evolutionary processes that unfold across cosmic timescales. But first, we must prove ourselves worthy of such magnificent possibilities. The test continues moment by moment, choice by choice, as we decide whether to evolve beyond our current limitations or remain trapped in the patterns that keep us isolated from the greatest civilization Earth has ever produced. The choice is ours. The underground realm waits. And somewhere beneath our feet, in chambers filled with light that never dims, beings who remember what we could become are watching to see what we will choose to become. The question is no longer whether they exist. The question is whether we can become real enough to meet them. The evidence for this transformation is already emerging in ways that most people never notice. Consider the sudden appearance of technologies that seem to solve problems just when they become critical. Solar panels became economically viable precisely when fossil fuel depletion reached dangerous levels. Internet communication emerged just as global coordination became essential for survival. Artificial intelligence developed just as human cognitive limitations began threatening our ability to manage complex planetary systems. These aren't random coincidences. The timing is too precise, the solutions too perfectly matched to the problems. It's as if someone understood exactly when surface humanity would need specific capabilities and ensured those capabilities became available at precisely the right moments. But here's what's truly remarkable. The individuals who develop these breakthrough technologies often describe the discovery process in terms that sound nothing like conventional research and development. They speak of sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere, of solutions that appeared fully formed in their consciousness, of knowledge that felt more like remembering than learning. Tesla described receiving his electrical innovations through what he called mental flashes that provided complete technical specifications for devices he'd never seen before. Einstein credited his theory of relativity to thought experiments that transcended normal logical processes. Modern inventors continue to report breakthrough moments that feel more like downloads from some external source than products of individual creativity. What if these breakthrough moments represent contact events that we don't recognize as such? What if underground civilizations have been seeding surface consciousness with necessary technologies and concepts through individuals who are receptive to such influence, but don't realize where the information is coming from? This would explain the acceleration in technological development over the past century. Not just gradual progress building on previous discoveries, but quantum leaps that introduce entirely new paradigms. The shift from mechanical to electronic systems. The emergence of quantum physics. The development of consciousness research as a legitimate scientific field. Each leap seems to introduce concepts that point toward the capabilities that contact accounts describe. electronics that respond to thought rather than physical manipulation, physics that acknowledges consciousness as a fundamental force rather than an emergent property, research that validates the existence of abilities that surface civilization previously considered impossible. The progression follows a pattern that suggests deliberate educational curriculum rather than random discovery. Each new paradigm prepares surface consciousness for concepts that would have been incomprehensible in earlier frameworks. We needed to understand electricity before we could grasp electronics. We needed electronics before we could comprehend quantum computing. We needed quantum computing before we could approach consciousness-matter integration. The integration might be the final prerequisite for direct contact. Once surface humanity develops technologies that operate through consciousness interface rather than mechanical manipulation, the gap between surface and underground capabilities might become small enough for direct interaction to be safe for both sides. We're already seeing the early stages of such technologies. Brain-computer interfaces that allow paralyzed individuals to control external devices through thought alone. Meditation apps that monitor consciousness states and provide feedback for optimization. Virtual reality systems that respond to emotional and mental patterns rather than just physical gestures. These applications seem primitive compared to what contact accounts describe, but they represent crucial first steps toward consciousness-based technology. Each breakthrough makes the next level of development possible and brings us closer to the capabilities that would make contact practical rather than catastrophic. But technology alone isn't sufficient. The consciousness that operates these technologies must evolve as well. And this is where the real challenge begins, because consciousness evolution can't be forced or programmed. It requires voluntary transformation that many surface dwellers might resist, even when they intellectually understand its necessity. The resistance isn't malicious. It's natural self-preservation. Our current identity structures, our sense of who we are and how the world works, provide psychological security even when they limit our potential. Releasing these structures feels like death, even when it's actually rebirth into something far more magnificent. Underground civilizations apparently understand this resistance and work with it rather than against it. Contact experiences often occur in stages, with each encounter providing just enough expansion to stretch consciousness without breaking it. The beings involved seem to possess extraordinary skill in calibrating how much transformation an individual can handle at any given time. This graduated approach might explain why contact accounts often span years or decades, rather than occurring as single dramatic events. The relationship develops slowly, allowing surface consciousness to adapt gradually to increasingly expanded perspectives. Each stage prepares the individual for the next level of interaction. The individual transformations might be preparing for collective contact that could occur when enough surface dwellers have completed the necessary consciousness development. If underground civilizations are waiting for surface humanity to reach a specific threshold of awareness, then each person who completes the contact preparation process brings our entire species closer to that threshold. The threshold itself might be more precise than we realize, not just a general improvement in consciousness, but specific capabilities that would be essential for successful interaction. The ability to perceive truth directly rather than relying on external authorities. The capacity to maintain emotional stability during reality-shifting experiences. The wisdom to prioritize collective well-being over individual advantage. These capabilities might be prerequisites not just for contact, but for survival in the transformed world that contact would create. If underground civilizations possess technologies that make current economic systems obsolete, individuals who can't adapt to non-monetary exchange might find themselves unable to function in post-contact society. Similarly, if social organization in advanced civilizations operates through consensus based on shared truth perception, rather than authority based on information control, individuals who haven't developed the ability to perceive truth directly might be unable to participate in collective decision-making processes. The preparation requirements explain why contact can't be rushed or forced. Surface consciousness must develop naturally to the point where interaction becomes beneficial rather than destructive. Attempting to accelerate the process beyond natural readiness could result in psychological breakdown, social chaos, or technological disasters that set back development for generations. But the natural development process might be accelerating on its own as global crises force consciousness evolution at unprecedented rates. Climate disruption is compelling recognition of planetary interconnection. Economic instability is revealing the artificial nature of scarcity-based systems. Social fragmentation is highlighting the need for more effective cooperation methods. Each crisis contains within it the seeds of consciousness developments that could contribute to contact readiness. Environmental threats are awakening ecological awareness that recognizes consciousness as part of natural systems rather than separate from them. Economic challenges are motivating exploration of alternative exchange models that prioritize collective well-being. Social conflicts are driving innovation in communication and conflict resolution methods. The acceleration might explain the increasing urgency in many contact accounts. The beings encountered often emphasize that surface humanity is approaching critical decision points where consciousness evolution will either accelerate rapidly or be set back catastrophically by civilizational collapse. They describe themselves as offering assistance during this crucial period, but only to individuals and communities that demonstrate readiness to use such assistance constructively rather than destructively. The assistance apparently takes many forms, from technological insights to social organization principles to consciousness development techniques. But perhaps most importantly, they provide examples of what becomes possible when consciousness evolves beyond current surface limitations. They serve as living demonstrations that the problems plaguing surface civilization aren't inevitable aspects of existence, but temporary challenges that can be transcended through appropriate development. The demonstrations might be more important than any specific knowledge or technology they could share. Seeing proof that war, poverty, environmental destruction, and social conflict can be eliminated provides the inspiration and confidence necessary for attempting the consciousness evolution that could eliminate these problems. Without such proof, the evolution might seem impossible or pointless. Why work toward capabilities that might not actually exist? Why sacrifice the familiar security of current limitations for uncertain possibilities that could turn out to be illusions? But contact experiences provide certainty that transcends belief or hope. When individuals directly perceive societies that have solved problems surface civilization considers unsolvable, the evolution from possibility to necessity becomes immediate and compelling. The certainty transforms not just individual consciousness, but the collective field of possibility that surrounds each contact experiencer. Other people begin to sense that alternatives to current limitations actually exist, even if they can't articulate what those alternatives might be. This sensing might be more contagious than we realize. Consciousness fields apparently interact in ways that conventional psychology doesn't recognize. When one person genuinely knows that expanded possibilities exist, that knowing affects the consciousness of everyone they encounter, even without explicit communication about the experience, the effect creates ripples of possibility that spread through social networks, gradually shifting collective consciousness toward greater receptivity for transformation. Each contact experience doesn't just affect the individual involved, it affects entire communities through the subtle influence of expanded awareness operating within limited consciousness environments. The influence might explain the sudden emergence of consciousness evolution movements in regions where contact experiences have occurred. Communities that previously showed no interest in expanded awareness suddenly begin exploring meditation, alternative healing, sustainable living, and cooperative social organization. The explorations often begin without any apparent connection to contact accounts. but they follow patterns that mirror what contact experiences describe about underground civilizations. The communities naturally gravitate toward principles of transparency, cooperation, ecological harmony, and consciousness development. These spontaneous alignments might represent the most significant evidence for underground civilization influence on surface development. Rather than direct teaching or technological transfer, the influence operates through consciousness field effects that inspire natural evolution toward contact readiness. The inspiration doesn't force specific choices or behaviors. Instead, it creates conditions where choices that align with contact readiness feel more natural and appealing than choices that maintain current limitations. People begin wanting to live differently, not because they've been told to, but because expanded possibilities begin feeling more real than restricted ones. This organic approach to consciousness evolution might be the most effective method for preparing surface humanity for contact. Forced transformation often triggers resistance that prevents genuine development, but inspired transformation that feels natural and desirable creates sustainable change that continues expanding even without external support. The expansion might already be approaching the threshold where contact becomes possible on a larger scale. Communities around the world are demonstrating consciousness capabilities that mirror what underground civilization accounts describe. The scattered demonstrations might be coalescing into a critical mass that could trigger collective transformation. When that transformation occurs, when surface consciousness evolves enough to support direct interaction with underground civilizations, we might discover that the barriers between worlds were never really barriers at all. They were graduation requirements, ensuring that contact happened only when it could enhance rather than destroy the consciousness it touches. The graduation might be closer than we imagine. The signs are everywhere for those who know how to recognize them. The question is whether we can complete the final preparations before the opportunity passes, before the crises that are motivating evolution become so severe that they prevent the very development they're designed to catalyze. The window might be narrow, but it's still open, and beyond it lies the most magnificent possibility in human history: reunion with the greatest civilization Earth has ever produced, an integration into a community of consciousness that spans not just our planet, but reaches into the infinite depths of space, where other graduated worlds continue the endless work of evolution that transforms matter into mind, mind into spirit, and spirit into something so beautiful that our current language has no words to describe it. The description will come when we're ready to receive it. The contact will occur when we're worthy to experience it. The barriers will dissolve when we no longer need them to protect us from ourselves. Until then, the work continues. The evolution proceeds. And somewhere in chambers that exist between the spaces we know how to measure, beings who remember our ultimate destiny watch with infinite patience as we struggle toward the moment when remembering becomes reality and the hidden becomes revealed. That moment approaches. The signs multiply. The readiness grows. And the greatest adventure in human history waits just beyond the next choice we make about who we're willing to become. The choice, as always, is ours. But the outcome might determine not just our individual futures, but the future of consciousness itself on a planet that has been waiting far too long for its children to come home. The choice manifests in the smallest moments, in decisions we barely notice, but that ripple outward through consciousness networks we're only beginning to understand. When we choose cooperation over competition in a mundane workplace interaction, when we select sustainable options despite their inconvenience, when we respond to conflict with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Each choice either strengthens or weakens the frequency that underground observers apparently monitor as indicators of species readiness. This monitoring system might be far more sophisticated than we've imagined. Consider the reports from individuals who claim to have been observed by beings who seem to know intimate details about their thoughts, emotions, and life histories, without any apparent means of gathering such information. These accounts consistently describe a form of awareness that operates outside the constraints of physical space and linear time. The beings encountered often demonstrate knowledge of the observer's childhood experiences, career decisions, relationship patterns, and even private thoughts that were never spoken aloud. They discuss life events that haven't yet occurred, but seem to understand how current choices will influence future outcomes. It's as if they perceive human consciousness from a multi-dimensional perspective that encompasses past, present, and future as a single unified pattern. This temporal awareness might explain the precision with which contact experiences occur at exactly the moments when individuals are most capable of integrating the encounter without psychological damage. The timing isn't accidental. It reflects an understanding of consciousness development that operates across timescales surface dwellers can barely comprehend. The development patterns themselves might be more predictable than we realize. If consciousness evolution follows natural laws similar to those that govern physical and biological systems, then advanced beings could calculate optimal intervention points with mathematical precision. They could identify the exact moments when specific experiences would catalyze maximum growth with minimum trauma. This calculated approach to consciousness development might extend beyond individual contact experiences to encompass the entire evolutionary trajectory of surface civilization. The crises we're experiencing, the solutions that emerge, the timing of technological breakthroughs, all might be orchestrated with the same precision that governs individual contact encounters. But orchestration doesn't mean control. Advanced beings apparently work with natural evolutionary processes rather than forcing artificial changes. They create conditions that make positive choices more likely without eliminating free will or guaranteeing specific outcomes. The ultimate decisions remain ours, but the context in which we make those decisions can be subtly influenced. The influence operates through what consciousness researchers have begun to identify as morph capabilities become more accessible to others, how systems develop and behave. When genetic fields, patterns of information that shape enough individuals demonstrate new consciousness capabilities, those through field resonance effects that transcend physical proximity. Underground civilizations might serve as generators of morphogenetic fields that make expanded consciousness more available to surface populations. Their mere existence creates possibility templates that surface dwellers can access when they develop sufficient sensitivity. The templates don't provide specific knowledge or abilities, but they make certain developments more probable. This field-based influence would explain why consciousness evolution tends to occur in waves that affect multiple individuals simultaneously across different geographical regions. When one person achieves a breakthrough in awareness, others often experience similar breakthroughs without any direct communication between them. The phenomenon becomes particularly noticeable during periods of collective crisis, when survival pressures motivate rapid consciousness adaptation. The current convergence of environmental, economic, and social challenges might be triggering exactly such a wave of accelerated development. The acceleration appears to be reaching critical mass in certain populations that demonstrate consciousness capabilities previously associated only with advanced spiritual practitioners. Ordinary individuals report sudden access to intuitive insights, healing abilities, and perception of subtle energy fields. Children display psychic sensitivities that suggest natural human potentials that surface education typically suppresses. These spontaneous awakenings might represent genetic activations triggered by changing planetary conditions or by proximity to consciousness fields maintained by underground civilizations. They could indicate that the barriers between surface and underground awareness are beginning to dissolve as surface consciousness approaches the threshold necessary for direct contact. The dissolution might be occurring through mechanisms that operate below the level of conscious recognition. dreams that provide accurate information about distant events, synchronicities that guide individuals toward opportunities for consciousness development, intuitive impulses that lead to encounters with teachings or practices that accelerate awareness expansion. Each mechanism creates plausible deniability that allows consciousness evolution to proceed without forcing belief in phenomena that surface worldviews can't accommodate. The process respects individual choice while providing opportunities for those ready to embrace expanded possibilities. The respect for choice might be the most crucial aspect of underground civilization methodology. Unlike surface cultures that often attempt to force change through persuasion, legislation, or manipulation, advanced societies apparently understand that genuine consciousness evolution must emerge from internal recognition rather than external pressure. This principle might explain why contact experiences often feel more like remembering than learning, more like coming home than discovering something foreign. The consciousness capabilities that contact reveals might be inherent human potentials that were temporarily suppressed rather than genuine innovations that need to be acquired. The suppression might have been necessary during earlier developmental stages when survival required focus on physical challenges rather than consciousness exploration. But as critical than technological advancement, the suppressed capabilities might naturally surface civilization approaches the point where consciousness evolution becomes begin to re-emerge. The re-emergence creates opportunities for individuals to serve as bridges between surface and underground realities. These bridge builders might not fully belong to either world, but they can facilitate communication and understanding between civilizations that operate according to fundamentally different principles. The facilitation becomes increasingly important as surface world crises intensify and require solutions that transcend conventional problem-solving approaches. Environmental restoration that works with natural systems rather than against them. Economic models that eliminate scarcity through consciousness-based abundance creation. Social organization that maintains cooperation without sacrificing individual freedom. These solutions might already exist in underground civilizations, refined through millennia of practical application, but accessing them requires developing the consciousness capabilities that would make such solutions comprehensible and implementable in surface contexts. The development process might be accelerating through educational initiatives that appear to be independent surface world innovations, but actually follow curricula designed by underground consciousness specialists. Universities suddenly offering courses in consciousness research, corporations implementing mindfulness programs, schools integrating emotional intelligence training with academic subjects. Each initiative introduces concepts that prepare surface consciousness for capabilities that underground civilizations consider fundamental. The preparation doesn't force specific beliefs or practices, but it creates familiarity with ideas that would otherwise seem impossible or threatening. The familiarization process might be essential for preventing the culture shock that could occur if contact happened before adequate psychological preparation. Individuals who've never considered the possibility of consciousness-based technologies might find such technologies terrifying rather than liberating. Societies that haven't explored alternatives to competitive individualism might interpret cooperative consciousness as threat to personal identity. The gradual preparation allows surface populations to explore expanded possibilities at their own pace, rather than being overwhelmed by revelations they're not ready to integrate. It creates space for questions, experimentation, and gradual adaptation rather than forcing immediate acceptance of paradigms that contradict lifetime conditioning. But preparation alone isn't sufficient. At some point, the theoretical must become practical, the possible must become actual, the hidden must become revealed. The question is whether surface humanity can complete the necessary consciousness evolution before the window of opportunity closes. The window might be closing faster than most people realize. Environmental tipping points approach that could trigger civilizational collapse before consciousness development reaches the levels necessary for accessing underground solutions, social fragmentations accelerate that could prevent the cooperation required for species-wide transformation. Yet, simultaneously, consciousness evolution appears to be accelerating at unprecedented rates. More individuals report expanded awareness experiences in the past decade than in previous centuries combined. Breakthrough discoveries in consciousness research multiply exponentially. Alternative communities demonstrating sustainable living principles proliferate globally. The acceleration might indicate that surface humanity is approaching the critical threshold where contact becomes possible. The signs that underground civilizations apparently monitor, ecological consciousness, cooperative social organization, wisdom-based decision-making, are emerging in enough individuals and communities to suggest species-wide transformation might be achievable. The achievement would represent the culmination of an evolutionary process that began when human consciousness first recognized its own existence and wondered about its place in the larger cosmos. The wondering has led us through stages of development that each seemed final until the next expansion of awareness revealed greater possibilities. We've evolved from tribal consciousness to national consciousness to global consciousness. The next stage might be planetary consciousness that recognizes Earth itself as a living system, of which human civilization is just one component. Beyond that lies cosmic consciousness that understands our planet's role in galactic evolution processes that span millions of years. Each expansion of consciousness has required releasing attachments to previous identity levels while integrating their positive aspects into larger frameworks. The transition from tribal to national consciousness required releasing exclusive tribal loyalty while maintaining community connection. The shift from national to global consciousness requires releasing exclusive national identity while preserving cultural diversity. The evolution toward planetary consciousness requires releasing the illusion of human separation from natural systems while maintaining individual creativity and innovation. The development of cosmic consciousness requires recognizing our participation in universal evolution processes while preserving the unique contributions that Earth consciousness can make to cosmic development. These expansions might not be optional luxuries that some individuals choose to pursue. They might be evolutionary necessities that our species must achieve to survive the challenges that accompany increased technological capabilities. The same intelligence that created nuclear weapons must develop the wisdom to prevent their use. The consciousness that generates genetic engineering must evolve the responsibility to apply such power beneficially. Underground civilizations might represent examples of species that successfully navigated these evolutionary challenges. They demonstrate that consciousness can indeed develop beyond current surface limitations, and that technological advancement can be integrated with wisdom rather than proceeding independently of ethical development. The demonstration provides both inspiration and guidance for surface humanity's own evolutionary journey. We don't have to wonder whether consciousness evolution is possible because we have examples of its successful completion. We don't have to guess about what post-evolutionary consciousness looks like because contact accounts provide detailed descriptions. But most importantly, we don't have to make the journey alone. The consciousness that created underground civilizations apparently maintains connection with surface populations and provides assistance for those ready to receive it. The assistance takes forms appropriate to each individual's developmental level and cultural context. For some, it manifests as sudden insights that solve technical problems or personal challenges. For others, it appears as synchronicities that guide them toward teachers, communities, or opportunities that accelerate consciousness development. For a few, it emerges as direct contact experiences that provide unmistakable evidence of expanded realities. The diversity of assistance methods ensures that surface consciousness evolution can proceed through multiple pathways rather than being limited to single approaches that might not resonate with all individuals. Different people require different catalysts for transformation, and underground civilizations apparently understand this diversity well enough to provide customized guidance. The customization might extend to entire cultures and civilizations. Different surface societies might receive assistance packages designed for their specific developmental needs and cultural contexts. What works for technologically advanced nations might be inappropriate for indigenous communities that have maintained traditional wisdom practices. This cultural sensitivity might explain why contact accounts vary significantly across different regions and populations. The beings encountered reflect the archetypal forms that would be most meaningful and least threatening to specific cultural contexts. Ancient astronaut figures appear to technological societies. Spiritual masters manifest to religious communities. Nature spirits emerge in indigenous contexts. The variations don't represent different underground civilizations, but different aspects of the same consciousness presenting itself in forms that surface dwellers can recognize and integrate. The underlying intelligence remains consistent even as its manifestation adapts to local needs and understanding levels. The adaptability might be essential for preventing the cultural disruption that could occur if contact happened in forms that contradicted core beliefs or social structures. By appearing in familiar archetypal patterns, underground consciousness can introduce expanded possibilities without destroying the cultural foundations that provide psychological security. This protective approach to contact reflects an understanding of consciousness development that recognizes the importance of gradual transformation rather than sudden revolution. Rapid change, even positive change, can trigger psychological defense mechanisms that prevent integration of new possibilities. The gradual approach allows surface consciousness to evolve naturally toward contact readiness rather than being forced into premature encounters that could cause more harm than benefit. It respects the organic timing of consciousness development while providing gentle encouragement for continued growth. But patience has limits when planetary survival is at stake. If surface civilization continues on trajectories that threaten ecological collapse or social disintegration, underground civilizations might need to intervene more directly, regardless of consciousness readiness levels. The intervention wouldn't violate free will, but might involve creating circumstances that make consciousness evolution more necessary and appealing than continued limitation. Crisis can be an effective teacher when other methods fail to motivate necessary changes. We might already be experiencing such intervention through the convergence of challenges that force recognition of interconnection and cooperation as survival necessities rather than optional ideals. Climate disruption that demands global coordination. Economic instability that reveals the unsustainability of infinite growth models. Social fragmentation that highlights the need for more effective communication and conflict resolution methods. Each crisis contains within it the seeds of consciousness developments that could contribute to contact readiness while simultaneously solving the problems that created the crisis. Environmental challenges motivate ecological awareness. Economic difficulties inspire alternative exchange systems. Social conflicts drive innovation in cooperative decision-making processes. The solutions that emerge from crisis-driven innovation often mirror principles that contact accounts describe as fundamental to underground civilization success. Sustainability over exploitation. Cooperation over competition. Wisdom over mere intelligence. Long-term thinking over short-term advantage. The mirroring might indicate that surface consciousness is naturally evolving toward the same principles that underground civilizations embody. The evolution doesn't require external teaching, because the principles emerge organically when consciousness expands beyond the limitations that created current problems. This natural emergence might be the key to understanding how contact will ultimately occur, not through discovery of hidden entrances or development of better detection technologies, but through consciousness evolution that makes the barriers between surface and underground realities dissolve naturally. When surface consciousness develops sufficient sensitivity, clarity, and wisdom, underground civilizations might become as visible and accessible as any other aspect of planetary reality. The hiding isn't maintained by physical concealment, but by consciousness limitations that prevent perception of what has always been present. The limitations are beginning to dissolve. The signs multiply. The readiness grows. And in the spaces between what we know and what we're learning to perceive, the greatest civilization Earth has ever produced waits for the moment when hiding becomes unnecessary, and the reunion between surface and underground consciousness can finally begin. That moment approaches with each choice we make to evolve beyond our current limitations, with each decision to cooperate rather than compete, with each commitment to wisdom rather than mere cleverness, with each recognition that our individual well-being is inseparable from the well-being of all consciousness on this planet. The recognition transforms not just personal awareness, but the collective field of possibility that surrounds all human consciousness. As more individuals achieve genuine understanding of interconnection, that understanding becomes more accessible to others through resonance effects that operate beneath the threshold of ordinary perception. The resonance accelerates as critical mass approaches. What once required years of spiritual practice might now be achieved in months or weeks. Capabilities that were available only to rare individuals might soon become common human potentials. The extraordinary might become ordinary as consciousness evolution reaches the tipping point where transformation becomes inevitable rather than merely possible. We stand at that tipping point now. The next choices we make, individually and collectively, might determine whether the greatest civilization on Earth remains hidden or finally reveals itself to surface populations ready to join the magnificent work of consciousness evolution that spans not just our planet, but reaches into the infinite depths of space, where other worlds continue the endless journey from matter to mind to spirit, to something so beautiful that our current language cannot contain its splendor. The splendor awaits. The invitation stands. The door remains open. All that remains is for us to become worthy of walking through it. The worthiness we seek might already be emerging in ways so subtle that most of us miss the signs entirely. Consider how consciousness itself has begun to shift in recent decades. Children born today display intuitive capabilities that previous generations had to spend lifetimes developing through rigorous spiritual practice. They seem naturally attuned to energy fields, emotional frequencies, and information streams that operate beyond the five senses. These aren't isolated anomalies. They represent a species-wide upgrade in consciousness hardware that might be preparing us for realities we haven't yet learned to perceive. The upgrade appears to be accelerating, with each new generation demonstrating enhanced sensitivity to subtle phenomena that their parents' generation couldn't access without extensive training. But here's what's truly fascinating. The acceleration coincides perfectly with the intensification of global crises that demand exactly the consciousness capabilities these children naturally possess. Environmental challenges that require intuitive understanding of living systems. Social problems that need empathic communication across cultural barriers. Technological developments that demand integration of analytical and intuitive intelligence. It's as if the consciousness evolution is being timed to provide necessary capabilities precisely when they become essential for species survival. The timing suggests coordination at levels that transcend individual human planning or even collective cultural intention. Someone or something appears to understand the developmental trajectory of surface civilization well enough to ensure that required capabilities emerge exactly when they're needed. The coordination might extend beyond consciousness development to include the technological breakthroughs that have revolutionized human communication and coordination capabilities. The internet emerged just as global challenges required unprecedented levels of international cooperation. Social media platforms developed just as collective consciousness movements needed tools for rapid information sharing and community building. Each technological advancement seems designed to support the consciousness evolution that could make contact with underground civilizations possible. Digital networks that connect minds across vast distances, virtual reality systems that expand perceptual capabilities, artificial intelligence that augments human cognitive capacity while demonstrating that consciousness might not be limited to biological systems. The technologies themselves often display characteristics that mirror what contact accounts describe about underground civilization capabilities. Instant global communication that transcends physical distance. Information processing that occurs faster than biological thinking. Interface systems that respond to intention rather than mechanical manipulation. We're unconsciously recreating the technological environment that underground civilizations apparently developed through entirely different evolutionary pathways. Our digital networks might be primitive versions of the consciousness networks that advanced societies use for collective decision-making and information sharing. The recreation suggests that surface civilization is naturally evolving toward the same technological integration that underground societies achieved through different methods. Instead of developing consciousness capabilities first, and then creating technologies that enhance those capabilities, we're developing technologies that gradually expand consciousness until it can interface directly with advanced systems. Both pathways lead to the same destination: consciousness that can operate through technological enhancement without losing its essential human characteristics. The difference lies in the sequence of development and the challenges each approach creates during the transition period. Surface civilization's technology-first approach creates the risk of developing powerful capabilities before developing the wisdom to use them responsibly. Underground civilization's consciousness-first approach apparently avoided this risk by ensuring that technological advancement could only occur when consciousness had evolved enough to handle it safely. The safety mechanisms built into consciousness-first development might explain why underground civilizations have survived for millennia without experiencing the cycles of rise and collapse that characterize surface civilizations. When consciousness development precedes technological advancement, the wisdom necessary for long-term stability emerges naturally as part of the development process. But surface civilization's different developmental pathway might offer advantages that consciousness-first approaches couldn't provide. The creative tension between technological capability and consciousness limitation has generated innovations and solutions that might never have emerged under more controlled conditions. Our chaotic, unpredictable, often destructive developmental process has produced art, music, literature, and scientific insights that reflect a kind of creative desperation unknown to societies that achieved stability early in their development. The struggle itself has generated forms of beauty and understanding that comfortable civilizations might never discover. Underground civilizations might have been observing these unique creative expressions with genuine fascination, recognizing that surface humanity's difficult evolutionary path has produced consciousness qualities that their own, more harmonious development couldn't generate. From this perspective, contact wouldn't just involve surface humanity learning from underground civilizations. It would create opportunities for mutual exchange, where both cultures could benefit from exposure to entirely different approaches to consciousness evolution and technological development. The exchange might already be occurring through individuals who serve as unconscious bridges between surface and underground awareness. Artists who receive inspiration that seems to come from beyond personal imagination. Scientists who make breakthrough discoveries through intuitive leaps that transcend logical analysis. Inventors who develop technologies that solve problems they weren't trying to address. These bridge builders might be accessing information streams that connect surface consciousness with underground knowledge banks, creating a gradual technology and wisdom transfer that prepares both civilizations for more direct interaction to be accelerating as global conditions. The preparation appears approach critical thresholds where surface civilization must either evolve rapidly or face catastrophic breakdown. The acceleration might indicate that the window for peaceful contact is narrowing and that underground civilizations are increasing their influence to help surface humanity navigate the transition successfully. The influence operates through mechanisms so subtle that most people never recognize them as external assistants. Synchronicities that guide individuals toward necessary experiences or information. Dreams that provide solutions to technical problems or personal challenges. Intuitive impulses that lead to encounters with teachings or communities that accelerate consciousness development. Each form of assistance respects free will while providing opportunities for those ready to embrace expanded possibilities. The help is always available, but it must be actively chosen rather than passively received. This choice-based assistance system might explain why consciousness evolution proceeds at such different rates for different individuals, even when they're exposed to similar opportunities and resources. The readiness to receive assistance varies enormously, based on factors that include personal history, cultural conditioning, and individual soul development levels. Soul development levels might be the most important variable in determining contact readiness. If consciousness evolution continues beyond physical death and carries forward through multiple lifetimes, then individuals who have achieved advanced awareness in previous incarnations might naturally display greater readiness for contact with underground civilizations. These advanced souls might incarnate specifically during periods when surface civilization approaches evolutionary thresholds, bringing with them the consciousness capabilities necessary to serve as bridges between surface and underground realities. The bridge builders would appear to be ordinary surface dwellers, but would carry within their consciousness the memory patterns and awareness levels that enable them to perceive and interact with underground civilizations when conditions allow. Their presence in surface populations would gradually raise the overall consciousness level of human civilization while providing underground societies with contact points that don't require extensive preparation or screening processes. This incarnational strategy might explain the sudden emergence of individuals who display consciousness capabilities far beyond what their surface world education and experience should have provided. Child prodigies who demonstrate advanced understanding without apparent learning sources. Spiritual teachers who possess wisdom that transcends their chronological age and cultural background. These individuals might be graduates of underground civilization educational systems who have chosen to incarnate in surface bodies to assist with the consciousness evolution that could make species-wide contact possible. Their mission would be to demonstrate expanded human potential while maintaining enough connection to surface reality to serve as credible examples for others who are ready to begin their own consciousness development journey. The demonstration effect becomes particularly important during periods of rapid change, when traditional authority structures lose credibility and people begin searching for alternative sources of guidance and inspiration. We're living through exactly such a period now. Religious institutions, government systems, educational establishments, and corporate hierarchies all face challenges that reveal their limitations and inspire searches for more effective alternatives. The alternatives often emerge through individuals who seem to possess knowledge and capabilities that existing institutions can't provide. These alternative leaders rarely claim formal credentials or official authority. Instead, they demonstrate practical results that speak more convincingly than any external validation could. Their effectiveness often stems from consciousness capabilities that enable them to perceive solutions that aren't visible to conventional analytical thinking. They can sense the underlying patterns that create surface problems and address root causes rather than just treating symptoms. This pattern perception ability might be one of the consciousness capabilities that underground civilizations consider essential for contact readiness. The ability to see beyond surface appearances to the deeper structures that shape reality. Surface civilizations' emphasis on analytical thinking often prevents development of this holistic perception ability. We learn to break problems down into component parts, but struggle to understand how those parts interact within larger wholes. Underground civilizations apparently developed educational methods that integrate analytical and holistic thinking from early childhood, multiple levels of perception simultaneously. The creating consciousness that can operate effectively at integration might be essential for understanding technologies that operate through consciousness-matter interaction rather than purely mechanical principles. If underground technologies respond to mental patterns rather than physical manipulation, operators would need consciousness capabilities that surface education doesn't typically develop. But these capabilities might be naturally emerging in surface populations as global challenges demand solutions that transcend conventional problem-solving approaches. Climate restoration that requires understanding complex ecological interactions. Social healing that needs perception of emotional and energetic dynamics. Economic transformation that demands recognition of abundance principles that operate beyond scarcity-based thinking. Each challenge calls forth consciousness capabilities that edge closer to what contact accounts describe as normal for underground civilizations. The challenges themselves might be designed to stimulate exactly the consciousness evolution that would make contact possible. The design suggests intelligence that understands both the problems surface civilization faces and the consciousness capabilities needed to solve those problems. The intelligence appears to be arranging circumstances that naturally motivate development of contact-ready awareness. But the arrangement doesn't force specific outcomes. It creates conditions where consciousness evolution becomes more appealing and necessary than continued limitation, while still preserving individual choice about whether to embrace the opportunities for growth. This respect for choice might be the most crucial principle governing underground civilization interaction with surface populations. Advanced beings apparently understand that consciousness evolution must be voluntary to be genuine and sustainable. Forced transformation, even positive transformation, creates resistance patterns that prevent full integration of new capabilities. Voluntary transformation that emerges from internal recognition and choice creates stable consciousness, changes that continue expanding even without external support. The expansion might be approaching critical mass where enough surface dwellers have developed contact-ready consciousness to make species-wide interaction possible without overwhelming those who aren't yet prepared for such encounters. Critical mass in consciousness evolution might work similarly to critical mass in nuclear physics. When sufficient numbers of individuals achieve advanced awareness, the consciousness field itself begins to facilitate transformation in others through resonance effects that operate automatically. The effects would make consciousness evolution increasingly effortless for those who choose to participate, while still protecting those who need more time for preparation. The protection ensures that contact occurs in ways that enhance rather than destabilize both surface and underground civilizations. The stabilization of contact conditions might be the final prerequisite for the revelation that would transform human understanding of our planet, our history, and our ultimate destiny as conscious beings in a universe far more magnificent than we've dared to imagine. The transformation awaits. The readiness grows. And somewhere in chambers that exist between the spaces we know how to measure, beings who remember what we could become watch with infinite patience as we approach the moment when remembering becomes reality and the hidden becomes revealed. The moment draws near. The signs multiply. The consciousness that could bridge two worlds stirs within millions of surface dwellers who sense that something unprecedented approaches. Whether that something emerges as contact, revelation, or transformation beyond our current capacity to envision, one thing becomes increasingly clear. We are not alone on this planet. We never have been. And the reunion that has been postponed for millennia might finally be at hand. The greatest civilization Earth has ever produced waits beneath our feet, above our heads, and within our own consciousness for the moment when we become ready to remember who we truly are and what we came here to accomplish. That moment approaches with each breath, each choice, each expansion of awareness that carries us closer to the magnificent destiny that has been calling us home since the very beginning of our journey into matter, through mind, towards spirit, and beyond, into realms of consciousness so beautiful that our current language dissolves before their splendor. The splendor awaits. The invitation remains open. The door stands ready. All that remains is for us to step through it. And perhaps, in the quiet moments when the surface world grows still and consciousness expands beyond its familiar boundaries, some of us already have. The stepping through might already be happening in ways that defy our conventional understanding of what constitutes reality. Because if we're honest about the evidence, if we strip away our preconceptions about what's possible and what isn't, we find ourselves confronted with phenomena that suggest the boundaries between worlds are far more permeable than we've been taught to believe. Consider the accounts that emerge from the deepest caves on Earth, places where sunlight has never penetrated and where the silence is so complete, it seems to press against your consciousness like a living thing. Spelunkers who venture into these depths report experiences that transform their understanding of what lies beneath our familiar world. Chambers that extend beyond the reach of their equipment, air currents that flow from sources that shouldn't exist, and most unsettling of all, the sense of being observed by intelligences that remain just beyond perception. These aren't the fantasies of thrill-seekers or the hallucinations of oxygen-deprived minds. These are the documented experiences of trained professionals, geologists and cave specialists who stake their reputations on accurate observation. Yet their reports describe encounters with architectural features that seem deliberately constructed, acoustic properties that suggest engineering beyond current human capabilities, and environmental conditions that challenge everything we think we know about subsurface geology. The reports share common elements that appear across different continents and cave systems that have no known connection to each other. Tunnels that maintain perfect structural integrity despite extending for miles through unstable rock formations. Chambers with walls that seem to emit their own subtle luminescence, creating visibility where no light source should exist. Most intriguingly, passages that appear to have been sealed from the inside, not by geological processes, but by what can only be described as intentional construction. When these accounts reach scientific journals, they're typically explained through conventional geological processes or dismissed as misidentifications of natural phenomena. But the explanations often require more assumptions than the experiences they're trying to rationalize. Natural processes that would create perfectly circular chambers hundreds of feet in diameter. Mineral formations that would produce sustained bioluminescence in environments where no organic material exists to sustain it. Structural engineering that would result in tunnels maintaining stability under conditions that should cause immediate collapse. The explanations work if you accept them without examination. But when you dig deeper, when you look at the actual data rather than the interpretations, you find anomalies that demand more comprehensive theories than conventional geology provides. These anomalies become even more significant when you examine them alongside reports from other underground environments, mining operations that encounter voids where solid rock should exist, deep drilling projects that detect hollow spaces at depths where the pressure should make such cavities impossible, seismic surveys that reveal networks of interconnected chambers extending across vast geographical areas. Each discovery is typically classified, restricted, or explained away through official channels that seem more concerned with maintaining current paradigms than investigating phenomena that might expand our understanding of planetary structure. The pattern of suppression suggests that certain discoveries are considered too significant or too disruptive to be shared with public scientific communities. But information has a way of leaking through unofficial channels, finding its way to researchers who are willing to consider possibilities that institutional science prefers to ignore. These researchers have begun assembling a picture of subsurface reality that differs dramatically from the simplified models presented in textbooks and official publications. The picture that emerges describes a planet honeycombed with spaces that could easily accommodate populations, technologies, and civilizations far more extensive than anything we've discovered on the surface. Not scattered caves or isolated caverns, but integrated systems of chambers, tunnels, and corridors that could support complex societies with infrastructure that rivals or surpasses our own urban developments. The infrastructure wouldn't need to be visible from the surface or detectable through conventional monitoring systems. Advanced engineering could create environments that are completely self-contained, drawing energy from geothermal sources, managing air circulation through natural pressure differentials, and processing waste through biological systems that leave no external signatures. Such environments would be invisible to satellite surveillance, undetectable through standard geological surveys, and accessible only through entrances that are carefully concealed or restricted to those who possess specific knowledge about their locations and operation. The concealment might be the most sophisticated aspect of underground civilization security. Instead of relying on physical barriers that could be overcome through sufficient force or technology, the entrances might be protected through perceptual screening that makes them literally invisible to observers who lack the appropriate consciousness characteristics. This perceptual screening wouldn't be supernatural or mystical. It could operate through well-understood principles of human psychology and neurology. Consciousness filters that prevent recognition of visual patterns that don't match expected environmental features. Attention mechanisms that redirect focus away from anomalous structures. Memory processes that fail to retain information about encounters with phenomena that contradict established belief systems. The screening would be self-reinforcing, because individuals who lack the necessary consciousness development would automatically dismiss or forget experiences that don't fit their conceptual frameworks. They would rationalize anomalous perceptions, explain away unusual encounters, and fail to recognize evidence that exists outside their accepted reality parameters. But individuals who have developed expanded awareness might perceive the same environments completely differently. Features that are invisible to conventional observation might become clearly apparent to consciousness that isn't limited by standard perceptual constraints. Entrances that seem like natural rock formations might reveal their artificial nature to eyes that can perceive beyond surface appearances. This selective visibility would explain why contact accounts often describe entrances that appear and disappear, pathways that seem to shift location, and architectural features that are visible only under specific conditions. The phenomena aren't physically changing. The observer's perceptual capacity is changing, allowing access to information that was always present, but previously undetectable. The detection process might require more than just individual consciousness development. It might depend on environmental conditions that fluctuate according to natural cycles, or artificial influences that underground civilizations control directly. Electromagnetic field variations that affect human neural activity. Atmospheric pressure changes that alter brain chemistry. Subtle vibrations that influence consciousness, states in ways that conventional science hasn't yet recognized. These environmental factors could create windows of opportunity when contact becomes possible for individuals who have achieved sufficient consciousness development, but wouldn't normally be able to perceive underground realities. The windows might open at specific times, in particular locations, under precise conditions that underground civilizations monitor and sometimes manipulate. The manipulation wouldn't violate free will, because it would only create opportunities for contact rather than forcing encounters. Individuals would still need to choose whether to pursue anomalous experiences, whether to trust their expanded perceptions, and whether to accept the reality of phenomena that contradict their previous understanding of what's possible. The choice becomes particularly crucial when contact experiences begin to accelerate and intensify. Initial encounters might be subtle enough to dismiss as imagination or coincidence, but subsequent experiences often become so vivid and undeniable that observers must either accept the reality of expanded possibilities or develop elaborate psychological defenses to maintain their previous worldview. The defenses can be remarkably sophisticated, involving complex rationalization systems that explain away even the most dramatic encounters. Stress-induced hallucinations that perfectly mimic contact with advanced beings. Subconscious memory construction that creates detailed false experiences. Psychological projection that transforms internal conflicts into external encounters with underground civilizations. These defensive explanations work for individuals who aren't ready to accept the implications of genuine contact. But they become increasingly strained as encounters multiply and provide information that consciousness alone couldn't generate. Technical knowledge that observers don't possess. Historical details that aren't available through conventional sources. Predictions about future events that subsequently prove accurate. The information content of contact experiences often exceeds what individual consciousness could produce through imagination or subconscious processing. The knowledge shared frequently relates to subjects that observers haven't studied, problems they weren't trying to solve, and possibilities they hadn't previously considered. This external information source suggests that contact experiences involve genuine communication with intelligences that exist independently of the observer's consciousness. Whether those intelligences are underground civilizations, interdimensional beings, or something else entirely remains unclear. But their independent existence becomes increasingly difficult to deny as the evidence accumulates. The accumulation might be reaching critical mass as more individuals report contact experiences and begin sharing information that reveals consistent patterns across different encounters. The patterns suggest organized intelligence rather than random phenomena, systematic communication rather than coincidental experiences, and coordinated influence rather than isolated events. The coordination appears to be increasing as global conditions approach threshold points where surface civilization must either evolve rapidly or face catastrophic breakdown. The timing suggests that underground civilizations, if they exist, understand the challenges facing surface humanity and are providing assistance at precisely the moments when such help becomes most crucial. But the assistance comes with conditions that ensure it can only be received by individuals who demonstrate the consciousness development necessary to use advanced knowledge responsibly. The screening process protects both surface and underground civilizations from the disruption that could occur if contact happened before adequate preparation. The preparation might be the most important work we can do, more crucial than searching for physical entrances or developing better detection technologies. Because when consciousness reaches the necessary development levels, contact might occur naturally without any external seeking or technological intervention. The natural emergence of contact might already be beginning for individuals who have completed sufficient inner development. Their experiences might be preparing the way for larger transformations that could eventually include entire communities, nations, and ultimately our entire species. The species-wide transformation would represent the culmination of an evolutionary process that began when human consciousness first recognized its own existence and began wondering about its place in the larger cosmos. The wondering has led us through stages of development that each seemed final until the next expansion revealed greater possibilities. We might now be approaching the greatest expansion in human history, one that could transform not just our understanding of Earth, but our recognition of our role in cosmic evolution processes that span galactic timescales and include intelligences far more advanced than we've dared to imagine. The imagination might be the key to the entire mystery. Not imagination as fantasy or wishful thinking, but imagination as the consciousness faculty that can perceive possibilities before they become manifest in physical reality. Underground civilizations might exist primarily in possibility space, waiting for surface consciousness to develop sufficient imagination to perceive them clearly. The perception wouldn't create underground civilizations from nothing. It would reveal what has always been present, but remained invisible to consciousness that couldn't conceive of such possibilities. The civilizations might be as real as surface cities, but existing in dimensional spaces that require expanded awareness to access. The access might be opening as surface consciousness evolves beyond the limitations that previously made underground realities imperceptible. Each individual who develops expanded awareness creates a bridge between surface and underground dimensions, making contact increasingly possible for others who are ready for such encounters. The bridges might be multiplying rapidly as global crises force consciousness evolution at unprecedented rates. environmental challenges that demand recognition of planetary interconnection, economic instabilities that reveal the artificial nature of scarcity-based thinking, social fragmentations that highlight the need for more effective communication and cooperation methods. So, here we are, at the edge of the greatest mystery our species has ever faced. We've traveled through ancient legends and modern anomalies, through geological puzzles and consciousness enigmas, through the whispered accounts of those who claim to have glimpsed something extraordinary beneath our feet. The evidence doesn't offer us the comfort of absolute certainty. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps the greatest civilizations aren't meant to be discovered by those who demand proof before they're willing to transform. Perhaps they reveal themselves only to those who've already begun the inner journey that makes such revelation possible. What we do know is this: our planet holds secrets we've barely begun to fathom. Whether those secrets take the form of vast underground cities, consciousness-based civilizations existing in parallel dimensions, or simply the untapped potential of human awareness itself, one truth remains constant. We are living through a time of unprecedented possibility. The signs are everywhere. The consciousness is stirring. And somewhere, whether beneath our feet or within our own expanding awareness, the greatest adventure in human history waits for us to become worthy of experiencing it. The question isn't whether they're down there. The question is whether we're ready to meet them. This has been Before Law. Keep digging beneath the surface. The deepest truths are always hidden in plain sight.